Want to ensure your app developers can create secure and smooth login experiences for your customers? With Curity, you can protect user identities, secure apps and websites, and manage API access. Find out more at curity.io.
Good day, folks. This is Shane Hasty for the InfoQ Engineering Culture Podcast. Today, I have the privilege of sitting down across the miles with Shania Levin. Shania is in San Francisco. I'm in Otaki, New Zealand, so it is across the miles and across the days. Shania, welcome.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to chat.
Probably a good starting point is, who's Shania?
Well, currently, I am the co-founder and CEO of Codesy.io. We're a developer tool that helps developers to visually understand how their code works and collaborate effectively. I've spent the past almost 10 years in dev tools, working at Google and eBay and Cloudflare and Docker. I studied computer science and business, spent most of my time in products because I love technology, but I also love people as well. And we have a pretty big vision. So we're just executing on that every single day. And that's basically become who I am.
What is that vision?
I guess I can start with very quickly. I'm sure a lot of developers have found this problem where you have a bug or you are starting a new job or you're starting a new team and that code base is just so massive and overwhelming. And the only way that we have today to understand our code is to read it line by line. And it is the most manual way. It takes the most amount of time. And I think that that's really dumb. I think that every other industry has visual tools or has summaries of how they understand things before they dig into details. And Codesy is the manifestation of that vision for code. And so I think once we can visualize our code, once we have the saying, a picture is worth 1,000 lines of code, if we have those pictures, so many things in our industry can change as a result of that.
Showing my age, I recall having to read through nearly 1 million lines of assembler code.
That's the same experience. It hasn't changed. The language is different, but that hasn't changed.
So tell me a little bit about your background. What are you passionate about?
My background, as I mentioned, I studied business and computer science, and I've always been in the technology industry. I actually learned to code after I was an analyst, and I was writing macros for Excel and got into programming. And this is my passion. So I was actually at Google when I started working in developer tools, and I was first working in ads, as many Googlers do at first. And then I got this role in Google developer product, and I could see an opportunity to help build tools for the people who build for other people. And so by helping the engineers really build and change our world, it's like this force multiplier effect. And you can help so many other end users by helping engineers. And so that really is my passion for not only helping them, but helping other people get into engineering, helping them to be successful in engineering, helping to create great companies where the culture doesn't suck so that engineers can thrive. And as a result, I hope that our world is a little bit better.
Let's explore that. Great companies where the culture doesn't suck.
Sure.
How do we build, and I'd like to tackle as part of this, the diversity and inclusion question as well, because you're a woman of color. This is an industry that hasn't got a great diversity and inclusion history. I would like to think that we're working towards improving that, but are we? And how do we get better?
Yeah, I do think we have a long way to go. I've personally experienced in the companies that I've worked at every typical thing that minorities face. And I think that for me, I would love that to be better. I do think we have a long way to go. I do think that culture starts from the top and it has to be a priority in leadership. And it's hard to do. I'm not going to kind of sugarcoat it. It has to be a priority and you have to work toward it every single day because particularly as a startup, we're all trying to make a business successful. And that's also very hard in and of itself. And so if you're not working towards that goal every day, particularly as an early stage startup, it can get lost from some of the other priorities. I think that in order to make that happen and work on it consistently, the founders or the leadership team has to really think about its culture as a product in and of itself. And that's how we think about it. And when you create a product in and of itself, you have to think about the vision of it, what success looks like, how to actually execute it, and then actually properly execute it, put processes on it to be able to scale it, all of the things that we do as engineers. And then also create principles that, like, what are your North Stars to making sure that you're going in the right direction. And so I think thinking about culture that way has helped, I think, us to try to create an inclusive and diverse culture from the ground up, as opposed to kind of bolting it on.
Given that culture as a product, what are some of the things that you have done at CodeC to make that?
I'm going to let everybody know that even though I'm talking about this, we've obviously made mistakes because we're all human. And I think that that is actually the first thing, is to recognize everybody's humanity in treating humans fairly and treating people with dignity and respect at a fundamental level. But at CodeC, we have 6 core values. And those are self-reflection, trust, humility, communication, transparency, and seek to understand, which is all about our understanding. Basically, it's another summary for curiosity. And so we have basically put in processes to be able to scale that. Our culture goes from starting from the candidate experience. So everything from our job description, where we talk very specifically and at length, hopefully in an engaging way, about our culture in our job descriptions. In our interview process, we screen for those 6 values before we evaluate someone's technical skills. And then we do an even deeper dive on those values after we do technical skills. We are getting better at having processes over for performance reviews and that sort of thing. But we do have a culture of feedback and self-reflection and creating an environment that people can feel safe speaking up, pushing back, asking questions. You know, I often say, hey, if this thing is really dumb that I'm saying, even though I'm the leader, just tell me. We can work on this together. And being able to support each other in that. And new people coming in, it kind of takes them aback that we're as open and supportive and giving feedback at scale as we do. But once you realize that, hey, I am actually safe, it makes it so much easier from there. And then there are little things that we do outside of the standard. For example, we call our stand-ups up-ups to be inclusive of people who can't stand. Little things like that to recognize that we're all human.
Sounds like a fun place to work. Let's maybe delve a little bit into the work. You mentioned the visualization of code bases. I can certainly recollect I haven't coded in anger for a number of years, but I certainly remember the amount of time spent combing through library code and, just horrifying. What does it mean to visualize a code base? What does that look like? What does that feel like?
Our product, we hope that it helps from the first time where you're seeing a large code base. So we visualize all of the files. We then are able to show dependency lines. We're able to pull out insights that you might not be able to get, summaries of information, where commits are happening, where all the hotspots are, and we're able to pull that out of the code automatically, so the developer doesn't have to. And then as the code changes, we also keep that visualization, all of the files, dependencies, all of those things up to date so that developers don't have to do that on their own. And then if you'd like, you can create and put any kind of architectural knowledge, labels, notes, features, tech debt, but like anything, ownership, on top of that map, and we will persist all of that information for you. And so from the initial browsing experience, you can then get kind of an understanding of, hey, where do I get started here? And hopefully reduce some of those unknown unknowns. And as you go in to write your code, we can basically, once you spin up like a draft PR, we can visualize your change in the context of the rest of the code base. So personally, I can see like, oh, hey, does this code that I just wrote touch anything else, impact anything else? Is this looking the way that I imagined it in my head? If not, I can change the code and update the diagrams. And then once that diagram looks exactly how I imagine that it should look, I can pass that along to a code review. So now I'm passing those mental models off to my teammates, can collaborate with my teammate. I can get the feedback, going back and change the code until it's ready to be merged. And then once it's merged, that diagram will update the original map and everything starts over again. It's really having like a visual buddy walk through from conception all the way up to merging.
I could imagine having that buddy sitting next to me would have been really nice.
We hope so.
We're talking here in the overall realm of developer experience, which is certainly a topic that's starting to come to the fore. I would say over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen more and more recognition of the need for improving developer experience. What else can we do as an industry? Where do we need to go to smooth out this developer experience? And what does it buy us?
Anytime you can enable an engineer to feel a little less overwhelmed, a little less anxious, you unblock them a little bit faster, it unlocks so much value for your company because engineers are creators of the thing that likely you're doing. And so the more that we can enable them, the more the business and the company benefits. I think that developer experience is a very large term, and it can be used to understand culture. It can be used to describe your in-app product experience. It can be used to describe your external documentation. It can be used to your support. And so I think that companies, as best as they can, should invest in those areas, not only within your company, your internal developer experience, how you get code out the door, how you help train engineers, how they pair and collaborate with each other to produce more code, but then also thinking about the developer experience, particularly if a developer is using one of the products that you have or tools or anything like that. And there are lots of points in the software development lifecycle that can absolutely be improved. The one area that we like talking about, that I am super passionate about talking about, is there's an entire point in the software development lifecycle that's just not on the infinity sign, which is understanding. So usually we start the software development lifecycle at the build part, like where you write the code, but developers spend 60% of their time reading code before they ever write any. And so we don't actually have tools to help them read and understand code a lot faster than actually the writing code. And that's really where the hard part comes in. We have this metric that like, when do you understand code? And that is when you have a plan, you know how to move forward. Once you do that, writing the code typically is easier than being like, hey, what are all the parts that I need to consider? How am I supposed to architect this? What are all the things that I'm missing? What are all the unknown unknowns that I don't know? Like all of those things. And so I think that that's a huge part of the developer experience that we're absolutely just missing. And yes, we can try to tackle it, but I'd love to build an ecosystem around helping developers understand their code a lot better.
You've founded the startup, and one of the points that was made was that it's a husband and wife team. What's that been like?
I get asked this question a lot. It's great. So I've been a part of, small startups. I've been a part of big startups, and our marriage was intentional. The company wasn't. And so I was actually supposed to start Codeseed with some colleagues from Docker. And then the pandemic happened, and I was still kind of like pushing through, talking to developers, talking to users, kind of putting together a product plan and what it was going to look like. And my partner was just there, and he is a brilliant engineer. And so we'd bounce ideas off of each other. And then COVID happened, and we were kind of stuck in the house together for 2 years. And that's how that happened. I think that we have a co-founder relationship, just like any other co-founder relationship, where I think it's actually a lot easier than most co-founder relationships from my perspective that I've seen, because we have very clear roles and responsibilities of who is the owner of which part of the business and who is the final decider. And then one person can advise on those areas, but ultimately we know who makes the final calls in those areas. And we have a level of communication that is deeper than most. Like once you know someone's like deepest, darkest secrets, like everything else is gravy to be able to talk about. And so to be able to build the kind of trust that we have just allows us to execute much better.
How does that reflect into the teamwork practices for your teams, the people doing the work?
So one, we tell everybody when they first meet us. Some people kind of already know, they're like, you have the same last name, but you don't look the same. And so we start that, kind of tell everybody up front. But as far as like how we communicate, I think that we communicate with each other exactly the same as we communicate with any other team member. When a new member joins the team, we ask them like, how would you like to receive feedback? What are the things that will set you up for success? And we have this culture around this amazing book that I highly recommend anybody to read, which is called Crucial Conversations. And so both of us have already practiced having hard conversations, and we've had lots of hard conversations. And so if one of us needs to give feedback, particularly in front of the rest of the group, because we're co-founders and because we're married, we do. And we know how to do that effectively, so it doesn't create any weirdness. Occasionally a babe would slip out, like, babe this, and occasionally, but like we try to correct that. And we have our different hats, etc.
I'd like to explore a little bit more the teamwork practices. This is the Engineering Culture Podcast. What are some of the things that you've done with your teams? You spoke about that culture as a product and so forth. What's happening on the ground?
Our team, the culture is really around those 6 points. The self-reflection, the humility, the communication, giving feedback, being curious, all of those result in deep trust. And so it starts with that. Our team basically, in order to work together, we pair. So like one person doesn't have like one picture of the code base outside of our products. And we all deeply can exchange those ideas and pair with each other, et cetera. We also have a very supportive team. So there are questions, if there are concerns, if there are pushback, people ask us. I am technically the product manager in addition to CEO. And so we do weekly sprints, Josh and I, with the rest of the team. And we're operating on 1 week sprints because one, of just the ease of using our own products, but two, just the communication and just the talent we have on the team. And then if you want to get into some of the stack things, I can also get into that as well.
A little bit about the stack would be interesting.
Okay. We are technically writing things in TypeScript, although we do have some other things in a few other languages because our product supports multiple languages. We have push button deploys. We have not gotten to continuous deployments yet. Our team's a small but mighty team. We are mostly all remote first, although we do have hubs of people in different places, but they're mostly West Coast based, those hubs, which makes the time zone thing not an issue, which I think helps us execute a lot faster as well. And I mean, it's basically like any other team. We do our sprint planning on every Tuesday. We go until Josh and I do pre-planning on Monday, and we do a product review session on Fridays. Basically, whenever someone is finished, we do demos where basically we'll shout demo, and everyone looks at that and supports each other with the things that they're building. And that process continues. It's worked really, really well for us to be able to execute quickly and move and mitigate and change if customers ask us to. I think 2 weeks is just like an eternity in startup time.
As you grow, as you scale, how are you going to bring this culture to life?
I really think as we grow and as we scale, it's training the team right now that's in place right now to be better advocates for our culture than Josh and I are. And it's because those people are going to be bringing in the next wave of people. At some point, it's going to get bigger than just me and Josh doing the hiring. And so being able to protect that, being able to put scalable processes in that make the other people executing it successful and holding managers accountable to that. I think that we have an idea around keeping the teams manageable in size And so putting proper managers in place who are trained managers to make sure that they are just as advocating for our culture as we are. I think that's how we scale.
Shania, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today. If people want to continue the conversation, where do they find you?
They can find us on codesy.io. They can also find us on Twitter at codesy.io, Shania11 on Twitter. I answer all of my tweets. You can also email me directly, Shania@codesy.io.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.